Hey, everybody, welcome to the Distro Boss Podcast. I'm on with Adam Tuttle. He's the co founder and CEO of a software company called Yippee.io. It's a company that focuses on it focuses on auditing and compliance. It's really interesting. I want to have a conversation with him about it and how he got started into it. Adam's, Adam has a really interesting story in terms of how he got into that world, and we're going to hear it now, especially from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So, Adam, thank you for being here. How's it going?
Thanks, Sam. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
Awesome, man. So you've gotten to this point where you have this like software. As an entrepreneur, it's always like a really good feeling. Like when you have this idea for a concept that's an app or a software as a service, it's like once you actually have it and you can show people how to get involved in it and build, and what do whatever it's intended to be doing, and it
Mhm.
does it well, isn't it like that's an amazing feeling? But like there's always a journey to get there. That's even before you've made any money. It's like just to get to that point, there's always this
Yeah.
background, this backstory that's like humongous. So why don't we start with like I guess what you've been doing, how you got into it, what was the thing that made this like epiphany moment happen?
Yeah. I mean, it's great to just kind of start with the origins, right? I mean, where we are with Yippee, to directly answer the question, is Yippee is something that's been in the works for years. I mean, honestly, almost over a decade. And it's the idea, it started as this huge nebulous concept that was just like, oh, wouldn't this be cool? And that excitement of like, oh my gosh, we could turn this into an app, right? And then you realize, wow, the implications of the growth or scale of an app, right? And we got really excited about that. But turning something from that nebulous idea into something that, hey, I can actually get this in the hands of somebody and they can use it. And as a bonus, it will make money. Wow, like that is an incredible journey in and of itself, to go from this to something that's at your fingers. So and the journey that got us to where we are now, which is a usable product that is in the hands of um, our industry and professionals in it, and is currently a growing and scaling app, is kind of a fun journey. And like I said, it kind of was about 12 years. So I guess to kind of originally start that story, it started with me being in my field as just somebody that was in the rat race of working. I worked for Four Seasons for a number of years in my career, and I was a hotelier with them, and I bounced around from Las Vegas to Washington D.C. and opened the hotel at Four Seasons in Disney World, and then back to Vegas. And somewhere along that journey was this concept of like, how can I get out of this race, right? How do I take a shot on myself? How can I value my own ideas? Um, that my father's an entrepreneur, and there was just kind of like this little voice in the back of my head that was like, don't do that, but then the other side was like, do it. You need to do it. And I always had this desire to do something that I wanted to do, to take a shot on myself, right? And I was honestly and frankly, I was coming up to being 30, and I was like, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And
Yeah, like
I
you're
just
you're
thought
you're you're
that,
working in that world. You're an expert of your trade.
yeah,
People are paying you to be the expert, right? You got like a
yes,
salary for it. Like they're investing in you. So it's like you mentioned this, I think, in our very first call. It was like, um, if people are willing to invest in you in terms of giving you a job, like why don't you actually invest in yourself? Why don't you take a shot on
yeah.
yourself if other people are willing to do it with you? I think that was when you said that the first time, it struck me like a hammer. It's like, wow, that's a really great way to kind of help people get over the hill, like in terms of building their own business. If you're in a job right now and people are betting on you, then you should bet on yourself, right?
Yes, bet on yourself. I mean, that was the push. It was the push over the ledge that said, if someone else is willing to take the bet on you, why not me? Why don't I take the bet on myself? I have all this knowledge, this training, this experience. I should put that to use. And I would love to say that that immediately went into building software. It wasn't, right. My jump off the cliff was
Like, were you
really
technically were you technical anyway? Were you a coder? Like, were you like
no,
a hobbyist with software or something? No.
not even close. Like I actually think, whenever I talk to my current clients, is I am a hotelier that just happens to be in this technology space. Like imposter syndrome sometimes is the biggest thing, and I hope that we get a chance to talk about that today. But overcoming that. But being in this space, I was like, I am still like pinching myself. I'm like, am I in tech? Is that really what I do? And it is what I do.
You say imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
We're gonna have to explain what that is.
It's a real deal. But we'll touch on it now. We'll come back to it. Imposter syndrome is you're put into this situation and you're looking around like, am I really fit to be here? Right. I mean, there's all these other people that are so much better at it, right? And you sit in this room and you look around and you see people that are in that space and you think, gosh, do I really even belong here? Like, should I even be here? I'm just me. Well, yeah, you're you. So be there, right? And that took a long time for me to get into. And this idea of how did we scale from being in the industry, leaving the industry. I did consulting, and while I was in consulting, I kept running into this same problem, the same pain point that I ran into when I was an operator. And it was interesting just to be on the other side of the coin of it, right? Same coin, just two different sides. And that pain was, you know, we want as a hotel consultant and trainer and someone that was helping hotels get better at delivering their service was great. We would come in, deliver this amazing, impactful training that took months, to put together and a lot of effort and putting people together in a training room. And then you'd leave and it would just fall flat, right? Like everything that you just did was
So are we talking about the onboarding process when when hotels hire like a cohort of new staff and then they have to put them into this like training program that's like structured and sequenced and it's like, this is how we operate. This is how are we talking about? Am I talking about the right thing here?
well, two things, and I probably should have been a little more clear here. Is there definitely is the onboarding structure, but then there's this also which we call like the training of service and development, right? Which is just, hey, this staff is currently executing at this level and we're trying to go to this level, right? And the steps that happen in between. And what we see is everyone wants this nice gradual line from here to here, right? Like, oh, look at this perfect ascension. And that's not how it looks. It's
With
up,
bonuses along the
down,
way, right? With
up.
pay increase and
Yeah, exactly. So what we would find is we'd go up here and then drop to here, right? There's an increase here, but then we'd come back up and then drop and then up and drop. And the real genesis of everything was, how can I make these falls less, right? How can I make so that when we go into an organization, how can we try to smooth out this ascension and not have so many pitfalls? And the big question that we really came around in our industry, in the hospitality industry, and this is not just particularly relevant to the hospitality industry, it's just the space that I know best, and so I'm able to apply this knowledge to this space the best. So obviously there's a lot of practical use outside of it, but back to the point is that's when the brain started thinking is, the answer to this, the true answer to solving this problem has to be a technical solution, because what's happening right now to solve this problem in the hospitality industry was a complete manual paper and pen process. And as I dug deeper, at first as a consultant, I began looking for a tool to solve this problem. And I was looking and looking, and I was like, I can't find this. Like, this solution doesn't exist, right? And not in the way that I wanted it to exist. And luckily, I have some good friends, and I called a friend, my best friend, and I was like, hey, for the 100th millionth time, listen to this app idea, right? And that's really what it was. It was like this poor friend of mine who's a developer, right? I mean, he's a coder. That's what he does. And he'd taken 100 of those phone calls. And finally, when I told him about this idea of creating a digital library for operational standards, and then a way that you could digitize that and then create digital audits, right? So staff could audit their teams with full comprehensive reporting, and I was going off the crazy train. And he stopped me and said, Adam, I think you actually have something on this. Like, I think there's actually something that you can actually do and model here.
I can relate
And
to that so so heavily. Like,
and then that's where it started. It
yeah,
was, let's talk about this. Like, let's get on a drawing board and then I tell you that the idea ballooned into this giant crowdsourced, nebulous, amazing tool that we were able to balloon and then shrink back down into something that we believe is truly our MVP, right? And we were able to deliver a product that was valuable to a consumer.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was too long, but there
no,
we
that
go.
was exactly what I needed to hear for me, because I feel like I did exactly what you've done in terms of like, I, you have an expertise as a consultant. You kind of see where, you're doing things manually, and you can see where there's a hole that's not been filled, essentially, where there's a gap that needs to be looked into. It's like, this is something that could be digitized as a part of this process that can become more efficient. And yes, there might be big software out there that could maybe do it too, but that's part of their overall offering, and they're way too expensive. And how do I then, well, some of the other offerings out there, would, in my space at least, were like, just they were clunky, or they would, what I was doing was their afterthought. So they, even though they had a provision for it, they weren't really something that was focused on it. And so I definitely looked into like how I could, I guess, streamline my own practices. But then I started to realize, hang on a sec, there's probably an opportunity here. And of course, I had that friend too, a couple friends actually, and I would literally burn their ears off, just hammering them with ideas and concepts, and
Yeah.
what I would think is the perfect solution. And could you build this with Sav? That's practically impossible. You can't do that. There's no way you
Yeah.
can do this, or there's no, I know you think everything can be done in an app, but no. And I'm not technically mine. I don't know what can or
No.
can't be done. I just figured, it's just a bit of code, and I mean, I appreciate the man hours, but I'm just thinking lines of code. If there's enough lines of it, you could get whatever you want done. But
Exactly.
doesn't kind of work that way. There are actual limitations, and there's any. Then they start to introduce you to all the complexities of
Mm.
like the stuff that goes behind the app, like the server costs and the server themselves,
Oh.
and the type of servers you need, and how you're going to scale, and what do we? You talk about MVP, and it's like, okay, so this is going to be MVP, but they want to build knowing what your end product's going to be, so that they can actually get there eventually. And then of course now you've got
Mhm.
to think of all these other things to do with your software that isn't going to be built right now anyway. So it's like, there's a lot of brain power dumped into this thing. It kind of, sometimes it sucks your soul away, because you don't know,
Yes.
you think, well, when am I actually going to start making money with this? But
Mhm.
I follow the same trajectory as you. Like and I'm still building my software. You're ahead of me, and I'm like, so I'm still tinkering with it and working with my developers. Um,
Uh,
but yeah, I can see it. So you get to this point. So you've got this experience. You've worked as a consultant, so you know the problems. You've now got a solution to it that you can tie in with your consulting, I'm presuming. Do you do it both at the same time? Is like the app like this bolt on to your consulting service, or is it
yeah.
something that you
So
sell directly?
that was the original model, right?
Okay.
Was to say, hey, here's the consultancy, and here's the tool that we used exclusively within that consultancy, right? And it was just like, hey, this is how we consult. And then it was somewhere along that process where the trigger really happened that said, we can sell this independently. Like, you don't have to have a consultancy. And to be frank, it almost got to the point where it was like, this tool is way more valuable than our consultancy, right? Because this is where the value is coming from. And I mean, it's hard to say that, because I think that there's always value in a trusted consultant that helps read the data and helps give you the proper direction where you need to go. But when I thought about going back to our model without that tool, it's like, why would I even open business? Like, why would I even be there? And so that because of that exact thought, that was the exact saying where we said, okay, cool, we're going to detach this from the consultancy, and we're going to sell it as an individual product. And then
It's
we started
brilliant.
moving forward and saying, hey, you can buy this without the required consultancy. And if you really want consulting with it, now the consultancy is the add-on, not the other way around.
Yeah, so the consultancy becomes the back end sell, which you could even put a
Yep,
higher price point on, because now they're already
exactly.
vested with the software. I mean, that's really smart. I mean, I feel like the holy grail when it comes to software, and it's the reason why I built it, and I'm building it, I should say. I shouldn't say built in past tense, because we're still working on it. But the reason, my rationale for getting involved, was the fact that it's, and just yours is, I presume it's a subscription model, right? The companies pay monthly, because you're
Yep.
B2B, right? You're a business to business model.
Yeah, we are business. Yeah,
And it's
B2B.
like based on the number of users that use it. So pricing scales
Yeah,
like that.
so um it was right now it's an annual subscription model rather than going to the month to month or by user. One of the tricky parts of the hospitality industry is that it's so transient, right? It's just like people moving in and out of positions, promotions. I mean, people can be there for months, years. And so we said, how do we make sure that we're relevant to our industry? and how can our pricing reflect that? So the cool thing about Yippee actually is, as we went through, our pricing model gives like a number of subscribers, but that are interchangeable, right? It's more of like active logins. So
Got it. Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole mess on really understanding that the pricing journey is a whole nother journey of itself. But yeah, that's how we ended
Yeah,
up
that
on
makes sense. You
how
buy
we
it, you
target
buy it,
our
you have access to say 20 or 200 users,
Yep,
and you can chop and change who those users are. And that's that, if you go
exactly.
more than that, then you have to buy more subscriptions. That makes perfect
Exactly.
sense. And of course, it allows companies to further embed it in their framework and their process. And therefore, the more they get used to it, the more you stay in. It's like one of the best ways to, again, like you said, make your product sticky, relevant,
Yep. Make it sticky.
so that they keep paying. But that's it.
Yes.
It's a fantastic model. Whether it's month to month or it's year to year, software really does help that. And one of the things I wanted to make sure that we address in this conversation was the a lot of people do get shy away from software. Software is like, I find it daunting because I'm not a coder, and of course, you alluded to it too. Like we're not cut from that cloth. Although we have entrepreneurial ideas that revolve around creating apps, sometimes it's like suddenly it becomes this big hill that you have to climb. Like, how am I going to build this thing? And of course, sometimes you have people in your network, like you have friends and buddies, and then sometimes you have to go and find them. You have to go make those friends, right? You have to go onto like
Yeah.
freelancing sites, network events, that kind of thing. Just start talking to people in the space to try and find out the things that you don't know, like how to go ahead and find developers to help you build something without you basically remortgaging your house and losing all the money that you put into it, which has happened. I've lost money plenty of times on crazy wacky software ideas.
Yeah.
But the thing is that once you've built it, you then have this, you've always got ongoing costs, but once you've built the product, you can then shift to then just selling it. And and so that's where you have the margins that work. And of course, if you have like a subscription model where whether it's month to month, quarterly, or yearly, you have an opportunity there. Once you've got people in your um ecosystem, if you will, they're now part of you're kind of part of their ecosystem essentially, but they've come into your world, and once they're in,
Mm.
you can start delivering value at different levels. And that's where you've got like the back end. So like now you're using the software. What can we do to provide you training? What can we do to provide you more? How
Yes.
can we help you embed this further? How can we help you achieve certain results, key performance indicators? Because you can track everything once they're on the software, right? And
Yep.
that's one of the brilliant things about whether it's business to business or it's like direct to consumer. Software is one of the best business models to personally to look into. Um,
Yeah.
you feel the same way, I'm presuming.
Yeah. I feel the totally the same way. And I want to backtrack a little bit on that conversation if we have the time for it, is that, when one of the big mistakes that I made coming into the software world was early on, and my co-founder, who's my friend Phil, who we developed Yippee together, was one of the big mistakes I did was like, cool, I'm the business, you're the development, right? You're the software guy. And because I didn't know software, I didn't know what the heck that was. And so it was really detrimental to our progress because I didn't get involved in something that I didn't feel was my space, right? So it was like, even though we were developing in-house, right? It truly, like, my mindset was I had outsourced the development of this software. But the problem was, and I think that what is really relevant for hopefully people that are going to be listening to this, is that yes, there's this expertise that's out of it, but domain driven design is the key to it. If you're not, if you're the one with the idea and you're the one with the expertise and you're the one that knows the industry and you're the one that has all of that locked inside your brain, why would you then delegate somebody else to build something without your absolute contribution, insight, and being as involved as you can? I mean, I think a really great sign of a great development partner that's working on the actual software development is to say, hey, this is what I'm working on, this is what it's going to be, and they're going to help bring you into that world, because a good partner is going to help, or it's going to understand, I need to understand how this is going to be used, right? Because in the end, that's really the key, this domain driven design of saying, how do people in this space think and function, and what are they used to doing, right? Because people want to use software that's familiar to them. They want to use software that makes sense logically to them. And it took me a while to realize like, oh, hey, I need to be involved in this. Like, I need to be a part of this wireframe process. I need to be a part of this, like giving broader information. And to the point where I almost felt like I was being, for the lack of a better word, pedantic here. Like I felt like I was, you know, babying this industry, or these software engineers. But then my friend, and the people that he's worked with realized, wow, like this knowledge of how your industry functions is so incredibly valuable. This is how we should develop this, right? And then that synergy begins. And that is when you have that domain driven design, now you're bringing things to your industry that makes sense to them, where they're like, oh my gosh, this answers this problem, this pain point, this helps with this solution, because it's designed around their function, and they don't really even realize it, right? But it is totally designed that way.
That's
And
so
so
important.
that is I think to me, that's the key of really branching. If you're not a developer, right? If you're not into software and you want to develop software, I think that's the first key, is remember that you really are the authority, even though you don't know how to develop software.
You're absolutely right. I actually had to learn that the hard way. Because
We all have.
yeah, I have got many times in the past where I've had, even if it was like simple things, like almost like a widget, like a calculator being built for something. I've gotten used to just, let me just go onto Upwork or Fiverr and find someone offshore that can build this small piecemeal piece of software. For small things, it's okay. You can just have it sent off and done. But when you're building something like a SaaS, which is software as a service, or something that's a little bit more intricate, what you want to do is, and what I realized I had to do is like when you say domain design, it's you've got to really focus on making sure that it fits the market you're trying to sell it to, and it does everything that they want it to do, not what you want it to do, and it's within the sphere of what your solution is. That is, but then when you spoke about wireframes, and some people that kind of just glossed over, people I know, because you gloss over me. Wireframes is as simple as making doodles and then taking pictures with your phone of what those doodles do, like page by page of your website, or your how your software is meant to work. Like you literally draw the home page of the software, and then there's a button, and you circle that button, move it to the next doodle. If you press that button, then this next page will open up, and it's literally you could, and believe it or not, there's plenty of wireframe software out there that can help you do this. I resorted to, because I couldn't even figure out how to use those softwares properly, like in terms of like creating like a very nice looking wireframe. I just resorted to pen and paper and just a ton of pages, and just taking snapshots of each one of these pages and then sending them to my developer, and then us having this back and forth in terms of what the design language should look like. This is the user experience. This is how it should flow. This button, they know that it's not going to be your crappy little design on they know it's just, this is the concept, this is what it needs to be. They'll make it look pretty, and you'll work with them on the design side, but this is what they need to know. And I think that escapes a lot of people. They just think that once they've come up with the idea, to go to the developer, and it will just be like they're magicians and they'll just kind of make it happen after you pay them the money. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. And I would say that the more you invest in those wireframes, right? This idea of, hey, here's the drawing, here's how this should look. This is how my button, where the button should be or where it should go. Like you can do that and advance it tenfold. Or the other option is you hand this nebulous idea to somebody, pay them money to create something. They're going to send it back and be like, right? And that's if you have good conflict management skills, right? If you don't have that, then you might be like, oh, it's great, and then it's not, right? Eventually that becomes the most expensive thing you're going to do, right? I think the basic start, if you really want to get into software, and I hope that you agree with it, is have an idea. That's it. I mean, even if it's just a screen, like 2 screens, just having an idea of what it does and the way you want it to work is going to pay off tenfold when you engage any type of developer. Like they're going to say, oh, great. Like, you know what you want to do. I know how to get there based off of what you've given me. Otherwise, those poor developers too, now they're just shooting in the dark.
They're just trying to make it up as they go along then. And they just,
and that's not fair to them.
Yeah, that's not fair to them. And I used to not realize that I wasn't being fair. I figured at one point it was just, as soon as I pay this money, they kind of know what's to be done. So I expect a certain type of result, and it wasn't. That's just not the way it works. Yeah. Okay. So you created this platform. So just to go back on your trajectory,
Mm,
you were consulting. So you had clients that you could
yes.
showcase this to.
Yep.
Were you beta testing it with them? Were you,
So many beta tests, just
okay.
like, hey, and it was almost kind of like, this is what we're using. Like, this is the tool I use. Here you go. And it was kind of wrapped into that consultancy. And it was just, we're testing this. We're
Like it's
figuring it
fixed
out.
our problem first. This is how we do the job that you've asked us to do. By the
Yep.
way, you should implement it internally. This is
Yep.
how you do it because that allows us to keep doing what we do better with you. Was that
Exactly.
kind of the
Yeah.
pitch?
Yep. That's the exact pitch. And it was just saying, hey, here's this tool. This is how we're going to engage with you because, we want between visit A and visit B, we want as little down swoop as possible. We want to create a bridge here, not
That's
not a
brilliant.
we don't want to lose traction. And if we can implement this software, it's going to help us know what to do between, they're going to use this software between this visit and this visit. So when we come back, we're going to use all that data to actually, move in and be better. If I can, I'll briefly explain, how that changed our consultancy real quick
Yeah,
and our clients use
please.
it.
But
So the
before we do
software,
that, I'll just say,
yeah.
just for anyone that's, this is a really good point to say. You created a service, so you were swapping time for money at first, and
Mhm.
that service was then digitized, and that's a really great way to build software. Instead of just always thinking, what software could I create for that industry? It's better to know what it is that they actually need by actually doing something for that sector. Once you're trading time for money, essentially, you can also it's this isn't the way to make all software, but it's a great way to build software because once you are trading your time for money, you start to realize what you can digitize, what can make it more powerful, what could make it more streamlined, what could make you more efficient, them more efficient, the whole unit more efficient. So it's like once that happens, then you can really start to hone in on exactly what that software should be. It's really asking your customers or your audience, if you will, or your target buyer group what it is that they actually want. You're trying and testing it, and once they've essentially told you what it is, which is them giving you the feedback in response to actually them paying you for the service that you're providing, and they're telling you that that's what they want, and if that's what it is that they want, then you can go ahead and create it for them. I think that's a
Mm.
fantastic way to build software.
And it totally is, right? It goes back to solve a problem, like solve a problem. And for us, this was the problem, right? And it goes back to that. What was happening is, the main training we were focusing on was service delivery and service training. And we would show up, and the traditional model of doing that was you would get each team, bring them into a ballroom, or put them through a role play type environment, and you would run through various scenarios and teach them the finer points of service. Great. And then you'd come back, and it was like, okay, how are we doing on those points? It was like, we're doing okay. So the software that was essentially created was, hey, look, we're gonna go through that. We're gonna establish these expectations in the hospitality industry. They're called standards, right? Outside of that, SOP, standard operating procedures, right? What are the points of a check-in? What are the points of luggage delivery from a bellman? How should a meal be ordered, right, or presented by the server? All of those things. But that intrinsically, by just delivering the software, it also changed our service in a way that rather than just showing up on this visit, wasn't just, okay, take team by team by team and run through, the checklist, so to speak. It was, hey, now that we actually have data on teams, let's actually, okay, great, we can focus on exactly what the team needs, where the points were that they were excelling, or where they're falling behind. We can really focus in on that. But then we were also, because we had the data, we were also now able to start pulling people from different teams that were struggling with the same concept, and we could have a class on that concept, right? So it's like, hey, rather than just this team with this team and this team, now it was, hey, let's grab all of these individuals and actually deliver something that's a unified message for them, and not muddle it in with people that are already doing well at things. And so this software has not only changed the way that hotels and restaurants and spas go about auditing their delivery of their services, and preparing for those official inspections, that may come from higher brands. But they're also saying, hey, we can actually better our teams here. We can actually have a really good insight onto how do we drive that, which has then also changed our business model and consulting wise. So like, now we're able to do things from a consulting side and consultants that utilize our product are able to do things that no other consultancy is capable of doing because this data now exists. So it kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah, I
Kind of
see that. I see that.
helpful. It's a helpful point, right? And we didn't realize that until we got it into the hands of these clients. Then we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to affect both ways.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so speaking about clients then, so in terms of like how you've been able to, like, I guess, figure out what it is that this software is going to be. You've now pressure tested it almost, and it's almost like, okay, so how do you scale from here then? So you've got you've got your bread and butter companies that are working with you. I suppose you've got referrals as well, and the contacts in your that you're already familiar with. But like, how do you build your business up bigger than where do you go from now? Like, what's your scaling strategy? Are you marketing out there? Do you have like sales funnels dotted around the internet? Lead generation tools everywhere, persuasion tools. Like, do you have like pamphlets, or not pamphlets, I should say, like books, ebooks that people should, these 7 tips to how you can improve your, hotel staff. Like, what are you doing as far as like getting your message out there to try and drive up some more revenue, drive up some more subscriptions to your software? Because now you mentioned you've switched from the consulting first to the application of the software second. You flipped it around, so now you're promoting the software itself. And I feel like a lot of people are going to be in that situation. If they build software and they haven't got the clientele that you have, they're going to be at this point right now, which is, okay, how do I market? How do I send it out? Do I just go with Google Ads, social media ads? Do I build a funnel? I've seen some stuff about funnels online. Like, what do I do? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think that this is probably, I felt this pain so much throughout everything, and to be honest, like, it's still something that we're getting better at, and I think that we're going to constantly be getting better at. And I think every hotel, or every software business gets better at that. And I think, to start off broad, and then I'll narrow down an answer specifically, is saying that this to me is what paralyzed me. This is the exact thing where it was like, awesome, I've got a product, I believe in this product. I've got strong beta use that's just like proven the product, right? The beginnings of product market fit, which this mysterious concept of like, do you have product market fit? Well, like, I don't know, people are buying it, so I assume,
Yeah,
right?
if they're willing to give me some money for it, I think we're
Yeah,
in the
like,
right
people are
direction.
paying for it, and it's real money, and they're really using it, and they're really in my market, and yes. But going back to it, this exact concept was like, I kind of felt a little bit frantic, and it was just like, and I felt like I was grabbing at the stars. And it wasn't really a helpful thing for me, because sometimes when you have a blue sky product, which means like, we are bringing something to market that doesn't exist. Like, there are very few competitors in this space, and we have yet to find and identify a competitor that does exactly what we do, right? Where it's like, like, sometimes it's like, oh, it's the Uber of, or, oh, it's the this of this, right? And it's just like, we don't have that. We're like, well, we're the us. And so when you have a blue sky product, and you realize, you're kind of defining the market, and you're defining the actual use, and going through that, it can also be really detrimental, because we, for a while, were just grabbing where we felt we could, and our efforts were all over the place. What we ended up doing is we recently partnered with an advisory company called Gain, and they have helped us, like, okay, hang on, let's rein this in. And rather than just shooting your shot all over the place, right, feeling like whatever we were going to trade shows, and we were doing ads, and we were doing this, and it wasn't targeted, it wasn't systematic, right? In At the time, we thought that they were, but they weren't. And finally we said, okay, what's our tier approach? So now at Yippee, we have a very strong tier approach, and it started with a focus on independent properties, organizations that could make decisions on their own without having to go through any of the bureaucratic red tape, right? It was just like, hey, we're able to make this decision by ourselves, and we want this. So that was a really strong and solid base for that. I think that I don't think there is danger in only focusing on this market, because it takes the same amount of effort to make that sale, almost as some of these others that are going to be at the top that we'll describe. So we said, okay, we're going to go after these independently owned business. Then we're going to go after a collection of manage, like a small collection of management companies, right? So a company that has 5, 6, 7 hotels that they're operating. Maybe they have a small brand affiliation, maybe some independent. And then from there, we said, okay, we're going to go after small brands, right? Like really small brands that are looking to, utilize this across their larger channel.
Like these are
And
like
then
the boutique hotel brands, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep. Go from there. And then from there was okay, now we're going to go after larger management companies, like 500 to 1,000 hotels, right? Somewhere in there, I shouldn't say that. It's like more to 1 to 500 hotels. So huge, big management companies. And then eventually we're not here at this last point yet, which is big brands, right? Where it's like, great, we're going to go talk to Marriott. Like, wow. And I think that once you can identify who you're targeting, that then triggers where do I invest my sales funnel efforts? Where should I be attending? One of the big things, we attended an independent hotel show, right? It was like, hey, these are hotels that operate independently. Oh, genius. We should be there, right? Because that was a good target market for us, right? And as we are climbing up this ladder and as we're scaling our business, we have a trajectory of that, we can now start to find funnels or channels of distribution that match our target audience, right? So if I'm targeting a corporation up here, I need to be going to the trade shows and advertising in spaces where those buyers have eyes, right? But I can't be marketing here if I'm trying to attract here. So at each level, we've honed in our sales efforts on each level. We've defined, really rigorous sales categories. So it's like, hey, if you're selling in this sector, don't sell into this because you're not equipped for it, right? You don't know the lingo, you don't know, how that sale process is going to work. So diversifying that sales process and having specializations in it has really helped. And then the concept of really identifying, okay, where are these people looking for their information? For us, Google Ads, useless, right?
Yeah, I find that when it comes to business
Useless.
software, that's
Yeah.
the trouble. Like people, when you're dealing with professionals, corporates inside of these organizations, they're not really susceptible to ads on Google. I mean, every now and again, you'll find someone who's kind of trying to rise the ranks and wants to find something new, so they start taking in information from what they see. But the truth is a lot of them have their own sort of plan. They have their own recipe for how they do their job within these big businesses, and so they're familiar with certain ways and when they have software, it's normally software that's kind of introduced to them, within their little world. They'll find out about the next platform that they could put through perhaps one of their colleagues and whatnot. So I found one of the best ways for me to kind of penetrate businesses in that sense, to get past the gatekeeper, if you will, was to kind of build up distribution networks. I used to find out what their supply chains were and say, who are they speaking to for this advice? Let me rope those people and cut them in on the deal. Let me get them like almost like an affiliate to the software. Like if you get this embedded in that company, this is how much we're going to pay you. Let me teach you how to do it. Let me show you the software. Let me get you understanding all the bells and whistles about it, so that whenever you're speaking to my target clientele, this is going to be the thing that you're going to be promoting because you know it best. And I felt like that was one of the stronger ways for me to work in the past with some of my old attempts at making software. Trouble was that back then the software itself wasn't that great, so it didn't work so well. But the idea was to get through, because I was trying with sales funnels as well. Sales funnels were great when it's direct to consumer. You find a pain point, you tell them what you start needling that pain point. Like, like, here's what's, do you have this? Well, let me just tell you a bit more about how bad that is. And then people are like, yeah, that's really bad. And then like, here's a solution. And then, then you have the solution. And then really at that point, it's just then a case of like closing the distance between them reaching for their credit card and then paying for it. So it's like, that's when you're dealing with consumers. When it comes to business, I mean, some might argue that, yeah, it's the same approach, but to be honest, especially when you're very niche focused like that, you're trying to get into like one level of management where it's not the entire bread and butter for a business. This is one area that can be, if it's in a very vital area of that business, and there are only a few people that care about it enough in that company that will, be ready to listen to you. And it's getting to those people, and it's tough sometimes. That's why I wanted to ask you about how you're doing it.
And I think I talked to, at the very beginning of my consultancy, I quit my job. I had no clients, zero. I had no clients. And I met with, this is crazy, right? And I think that I was hungry, right? I met with an employee's best friend's dad. Okay, track that. Like an employee's best friend's
Dad.
dad,
Okay.
who just happened to be like this mogul in the hotel world. And the dude blew me off like 14 times. Like I got his email or I got his phone number, and I just blew this guy up, right? It was just like, I got nothing to lose. He doesn't know me, whatever. Like I'm gonna pester him until I get an answer. And you know what? Finally, I met him at a PF Chang's during happy hour. Like
PF Chang's, by the way, is a Chinese restaurant, and they do have an happy hour. I've been there plenty because I've got some of my audience is based in the UK. They were PF Chang.
Oh yeah, PF Chang's, like upscale Chinese restaurant. Upscale, right?
Upscale, great Singapore
Chain.
noodles. Yeah.
Yeah. So I there I am sitting there, and he is just, he doesn't want to talk to me, but he is. So we're making the most of it. He said, "You want to know the trick to business?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. Like, give it to me, right?" And I've got my notepad, and he said to me, he said, "Look, if you want to get into a door, find someone that already has the pass to get in."
That's amazing.
Okay. He's like, "Look, no one wants to buy anything, right? Like the only people that want to buy things are those that are shopping, right? So
Yeah.
think about how many times you've been hit up and you don't want it, and it's so annoying. But then how many times when you're looking for something, you're sold something, it's like, wow, look at this amazing thing, and how you feel about that, right? So if you want to find someone that's shopping, find people that are already delivering that, or something that's accompanying to that, right? That can introduce you to a human being. And now you're not just like these two gatekeepers going at each other. You're actually going there. So I think it articulates what you were saying so well, Sav, here, is that find someone that already has the key to the door and that's already being led into this business, and saying, hey, how do I know you? How can I help you with a task that you're already trying to accomplish, or build build off of a trusted relationship. And that's where we found our very early success in Yippee, was going through my contacts and saying like, hey, we're doing this. Would you be willing to introduce us? And you find out real quick the people that are willing to help you, and the ones that have just blown smoke up,
Yeah, you'll
all,
see it.
and
You can say it, blow smoke up your ass. And there's a lot of them. And it's
yeah,
like, like we can curse on here. Don't worry about it. Like when it comes to this kind of stuff, especially when it gets emotional like that, like, because
yeah,
that's another thing. When you get into business, whether it's software or anything else, you'll start to look to those people who you thought would help you out. And a lot of the time they won't. And there it is just complete smoke. And when it comes to selling, yeah, I think, and by the way, I would say this: double down on what's working. If that was working for you in the past, one of the my biggest thing in business is distribution. That's how I build everything. You've got to have your marketing funnels, of course. You've got brand building, of course. But when it comes to like really driving immediate results in terms of actual money coming in the bank, finding those people who already have access to your target buyer group is the key. As you say, it's like you just got to hammer those people, figure out all the different ways in which you can get them onboarded in regards to whether it's going to be a commission structure, slice of the pie, or if your industry is regulated and you can't do that, so it works that way in pharmaceuticals and finance. There's other things that you can do to incentivize, to get people to get your product into the hands it needs to be. And it is, especially when it comes to software, a lot of the time, especially when I say software, I'm talking about software as a service, or things that change pre-existing models. You're kind of disrupting something. A lot of the time, an ad's not going to be enough to get you in. You need that person whispering in someone else's ear, saying,
yeah.
"Hey, listen, what's better? Check this out." When you switch, I don't know what your own personal. So I used to be on iPhones. Well, I'm still on iPhone now, but I remember when there was a time when I switched to the Samsung Galaxies, and the only reason I did that was someone telling me to. You know, it
Ooh,
wasn't because their ads worked. Their ads didn't work on me. I'm happy with my iPhone. The only reason I switched to the Galaxies for a while was literally because someone said, "Hey, do you know you could do this? You know, you could do this. This is why you should try it." And so I did. I ended up trying it. I did like it, but I missed the blue bubble, so I went back. But
yeah,
so,
same.
yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
iPhone for me is too sticky, right? Like to get
yeah,
out. Oh, now I gotta be that guy in my family group text, and
I'm the green
I gotta
bubble guy. Yeah.
look at me. But to answer, I think the question is there's two things, right? If you're going to go after someone and make a sale that's not through a strong distribution channel, right? Through a reputable source and channel, it takes 7 points of contact for that person to even hear you, right? 7. And that could be I talked to you at a trade show, I saw an ad, I saw a LinkedIn post, I saw a podcast where you were on. 7. And think about how expensive that is in both time and money, right? Keeping understanding the cost of both versus when you have someone that is genuinely like a good distribution channel where you're able to say, hey, this is a trusted person, and they're going to go in and say, hey, you should check this out. Like, oh wow, that's one. It's one, right? And that gets you in so much faster, so much quicker, and you'll be able to get in, and because there's already trust built with that channel for that person. So the sooner you can identify
You're
those.
leveraging the trust and faith that they have. Yeah.
Yes, right. And then, now the onus really is on you to say, hey, I've got to deliver a product that will keep this person, this or this channel happy with me. Right. So I've got to make sure that I'm delivering it. And I think it elevates the game on both sides. So
Cool, man. Okay. Let me ask you this because what's gone wrong? Because it's all like what's gone right. Like, okay, what's gone wrong with software? Like, with not necessarily your software, just with your journey. Like, yeah, Sam, we had this thing. We've had some struggles. People always say we had struggles, we failed forward, but what went wrong, man? What was it like? What happened where you almost broke everything and then had to save it? Like, because this
yeah,
is important because it's going to happen, everyone. When you start a company, sometimes it's not the sales, sometimes it's not your product, sometimes it's the tax bill you get, sometimes it's the two employees that you have that have an argument that both leave at the wrong time. And suddenly you've now had a brain drain in your company. You can't actually execute on the things that you want to execute. There's so many different things that can happen that can be literally have cataclysmic effects on your business that would make you go home that night or and you can't turn it off. You can't turn the problem away. You literally just have to think to yourself, am I going to stay in this business or am I going to just throw the towel in because this is way too much? Like, has there been something like that for you? Has there been multiples like that for you?
like if I could write the book, so as long as you've got another 2 hours, we're good. But
Yeah.
I'm going to summarize this as succinctly as possible, and there's 3 points here. First one: perfection is the enemy to done. Uh, One of the challenges that we faced early on is that we went way too myopic, like way too into the nitty gritty, and we didn't just get stuff out, right? And we spent so much time on that. And we're talking a year, 365 days of wasted time of digging into what we believed was the right answer, rather than being like, it's like this, get it out and get it into the hands of users. Like the learning that happens outside of your own brain, like get enough that it functions and is an intentional thing, right? But get it out, like push it out there and let your users tell you what needs to be developed, what doesn't work. And that's why beta users were so good for us. Like we had an early partner that was like, oh, everybody has to pay for everything. Hell no. Like get out. Hey, this is free. Your job is to break it, right? And it was like we were afraid of that for some reason. And that's not. Perfection is the absolute enemy to good. And it destroyed us for a long time. It made us slow. We lost great opportunities, and we were just afraid to take our shot, right? And we needed to. I think that anyone that's going to take an adventure, whether they're starting their own business or they're developing software, whatever it is, there really is this concept behind your MVP, your minimal viable product. Like, what is the littlest thing that you can get out there? And we way overshot that MVP, and we should have been out way sooner than that.
Yeah.
And that had consequences for us. So I think that was like the first one. The second one is we hired people And we hired great people, and they were friends, and we had to fire them. And we had to be like, hey, this is not cutting out. And that was expensive. It was damaging to relationships. It costs a lot emotionally as well. And I think that, for us, it was a huge setback because it really disrupted our team, right? And our core.
But did they help a little bit when you start out? Because this everyone says that, don't hire friends, but when you're starting a business, you don't have always,
You
you don't
have to
always
hire
have the
friends.
you don't have the money to just go hiring people. And it's usually your friends who you're talking to that are willing to, give you some of their time to help you get off the ground. And then you just find out a little way later that, okay, you guys really aren't going to be in this for the long term. You're not really cutting, you don't really cut the mustard, you're not really there. So
Yeah.
time to go. But it's like,
There was help. Yeah. There
yeah,
was
it's
help.
like they were help. So it's like, you get to that point. It's like, it's a tough one because people always, the advice is always given, don't go into business with your friends or family. It's like, but sometimes you have to. I think sometimes it's just about being clear on things with them up front. It's like, look, I really want you to be involved in this, but if it does go wrong, it can go wrong. If I have to implode this thing or whatever, like, you might have to go. And it's like, as long as you've said it at least once, when it does have to happen, it's easier to do. It's easier to have that conversation, I think. But it's always hard, man. It's real
Yeah.
tough.
And it is. And I think that the last thing that for us is, Stephen R. Covey says, begin with the end in mind. And I think at some point in time, Yippee, we know where it's going. It's going to be so much more than the app that it is. But at some point, we lost track of that end, and we were just focusing on where it was. And that was so unhelpful for the development side, the sales side, and and even as we've gone, we've been a fully bootstrapped company, and as we are starting to make decisions on outside investments and things like that, we're realizing, oh my gosh, we could get this to be much bigger, right? And we were kind of losing that. I think that one of the most important parts of where something to keep doing is keep dreaming. I know it sounds kind of like foo-foo and fluffy, but keep dreaming. Like, keep, where is this going to go? And for us, it went wrong when we stopped doing that because we lost track of who we were and where we were going. Sure, there's all the other stuff like the taxes and be like, oh, we got to pay this and we got to pay that, and like, oh, you onboarded an employee. Well, this has implications and all of that. I think that those are road humps that everyone's going to experience, and there's a whole nother thing that we could go down the rabbit hole with. But when it really came down to moving the company forward, we for a little bit started to lose track of that dream, and that really hurt us in our ability to move our product forward, because then you just get, when you only look this far away, you only see this, right?
It's so easy for that to happen. I mean, you've got to have your North Star. I actually had this conversation with my own partners this morning. I actually used the analogy of a Jack Sparrow,
Yeah.
and him putting together his little pirate ship when he didn't have a ship.
Mm-hmm.
And he's convinced everyone that he has the compass and he has the treasure map. He has X, where X marks the spot. And he's bringing all, he's pulling in all his crew together on this promise of, we'll get here. Now it's going to be a bumpy road, and there's challenges along the way, but this is our North Star. This is where we're headed. And I feel like that, and I say that because you can get stuck in the details, and you can get, especially when it comes to software, if something goes wrong, and because if there's a partnership or if there's other people in the mix, and you said, I shouldn't say especially with software, just business in general. When you make decisions, and something doesn't go right, or you're not progressing at the rate that you expect to progress, or not enough money's coming in, or whatever the case is,
Yeah.
it's easy to get stuck trying to fix those problems. And then once you've fixed it, another problem happens and you're putting out fires everywhere, and it's hard to keep progressing and getting to where you want to get to. So yeah, absolutely, 100%. You've got to have your vision in mind so that you can break it down, have those milestones, even though the vision may change, the destination may change. As long as you have a destination in mind, as your company grows and things start to warp and shift in your business, and you end up becoming a specialist in a different place, it can happen. Definitely can happen. All right. So I know I like to keep these podcasts about an hour.
Yeah, of
And
course.
by the way, and I feel like I feel like we need to have another conversation. But if there was, because I can see you're growing, and I need to have more than one conversation, more than two conversations with you, because I feel like tracking the progress of people in this space is incredibly important for those who are thinking about getting involved with the software business, a business in general, because there are going to be shifts. Who knows? Maybe in the future I talk to you and it could be a completely different thing you're doing, or a different area of consulting, or a different area. Your app could be delivering against a different vertical. Who knows? I hope it goes well for you. But if there was like one key sort of piece of advice, or if there was a playbook or a recipe, like here's your first 4 steps if you're going to do something. And this is speaking to the person who's sitting behind their desk, maybe listening to this, thinking that they might want to quit their job and become an entrepreneur, do something that they want in life. But and by the way, this also applies to the people where it's the job that they're working in, the industry, the field that they're currently specialists at is not necessarily the thing that they want to be in business in for themselves, because that happens. Like there's a lot of accountants out there that don't want to be accountants. Whilst they are specialists at counting stuff, they want to do something completely different. So if you had to give like a little recipe of like, this is what you should do if you're in that space, what would you do? What would you say to those people who are thinking about getting into business?
Yeah. 4 steps right off the bat. 1, write it out. Like, get it out of your head. Like, get it out of your brain, put it onto a piece of paper. I don't care what that paper is, whether it's a blog, whether it's a literal piece of paper, a notebook, a note in your smartphone. Get it out of your brain. List the top 3 reasons of why it's needed. No one wants to buy anything that's not needed. And if you can't justify why it's needed, don't do it. Like, period, move on. Or come back to it until you can. And then the next thing is synergize with as many, get as much ideas as you can, connections, talk with people. Ideas are funny. They're great, and everybody has your idea. We want to hold them. We want to keep them hidden inside of us, and we don't want to share those. Like, share your ideas, put it out there. I guarantee you, not people aren't going to swoop in and create this multi-million-dollar business just because you told them about your idea. Very rare. And the last part is follow the advice of Yoda. It's do or do not. There's no try, meaning just do it. Just do it. It can be a part-time thing. You don't have to quit your job and cash out your retirement. You don't have to make those big moves. I mean, I did it. It was stupid. I had 3 kids at the time, and it was like, what am I doing? But it doesn't have to be that. It can be just start it. Like, figure it out. Launch. Put out a website. Before I even, had quit my job, I made a website and was like, yeah. And it wasn't live, but it was like, that was my brain dump. That was getting it out of my head. Like, what am I going to do? So just get it out there. I think that the answer is do it or don't do it, and stop dreaming about it, right?
That's brilliant.
Realize that you're going to do it or don't, and move on, and don't waste time on that, and plan the next thing.
And it's not always going to be perfect. And I think there's a saying like, if perfection could be achieved, it wouldn't be worth striving for. So you're never going to have the perfect model. It's about just getting up and getting going. Yeah. And it will work for you, provided you are persistent and you make it happen. Sometimes through sheer force of will, sometimes a bit of luck, but you'll get there. As long as you're on that road, you're on the right path.
You'll make it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, I do want to have a conversation with you in, like, so we say 6 months. I want to call you in 6 months, because it would be nice, because things in software, things in business move quick. It's not, you can scale up super fast, especially in, and like I say, this goes again to the whole subscription model space. You can go from today to having, say, 15 to 20 clients, and then tomorrow you could have a connection that gives you access to like the next 30, and it's like triples, doubles or triples your ARR, the money that you have coming in, and can just propel your business to the stratosphere. And it can happen very quickly in software. It's one of the reasons why I love the idea of getting involved with software. So I can't wait to speak to you again in 6 months. I hope that's what's happening with you. Like, you're super expanding, you're growing super fast. And I'm sure we'll have conversations in the meantime too. But yeah, really appreciate you taking the time out to have this conversation with us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eb. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Next time. So to everybody else, like and subscribe.